In the heart of Onkoba, a small village nestled between rolling hills and sacred forests, Otino and Owaino lived a life marked by profound longing. Their humble mud-thatched home stood as a testament to their unwavering love, despite the whispers and judgmental glances of their fellow villagers. For years, they had prayed to the gods, offering sacrifices of goats and roosters at the sacred river Kizira, hoping for the miracle of a child. The river, believed to be the dwelling place of the goddess of miracles, had heard countless prayers, granting wishes to many, yet remained silent to their desperate pleas. Nights were spent in hushed conversations, their hearts heavy with the weight of unfulfilled dreams. Owaino was a respected man in the village, known for his kindness and integrity, traits that stood in stark contrast to the growing pressures from his family and community. His mother, a formidable woman with sharp words and piercing eyes, would often criticize their childless state. "Why do you cling to this barren woman?" she would ask, her voice dripping with disdain. "Has she bewitched you so completely that you cannot see reason?" The rumor spread like wildfire through the village, whispers that Otino had somehow enchanted Owaino, preventing him from taking a second wife who could bear children. These malicious stories reached Etienne's ears, each word a sharp blade cutting into her already wounded spirit. Despite the constant bombardment of cruel remarks and societal pressure, Owaino remained steadfast in his love for Otino. "The gods are wise," he would tell her, holding her close during moments of deepest despair. "They know why we do not have a child, and you are the only woman of my youth. I will always love you, no matter what." His words were a balm to Etienne's wounded heart, a reminder of their deep connection that transcended the village's narrow expectations. Yet, the pain of childlessness continued to consume her, driving her to desperate measures of seeking divine intervention. Etienne's devotion to finding a solution knew no bounds. She would spend days at the river Kisra, her slender frame bent in perpetual prayer, her tears mixing with the sacred waters. She undertook hunger strikes, challenging the gods to either grant her a child or take her life. "If you cannot bless me with a child," she would cry out to the river goddess, "then what purpose do I serve?" Her passion and determination were a testament to her unbreakable spirit, a quality that would later be reflected in the extraordinary child she was destined to receive. The river seemed to listen, its waters rippling with a mysterious energy that hinted at future miracles. As the seasons changed and years passed, the village continued its relentless judgment. Women would whisper behind Etienne's back, men would look at Owaino with pity, and children would innocently ask questions that cut deep into their souls. But Otino and Owaino's love remained unshaken, a beacon of hope in a community that often seemed more interested in gossip than compassion. Little did they know that their prayers were about to be answered in a way that would not only transform their lives but would also change the destiny of their entire village. The gods were listening, and a miracle was about to unfold, a miracle named Emma. The night Emma was born was unlike any other in Onkoba. A brilliant star seemed to hover directly above their small hut, casting an ethereal glow that made the midwife pause in wonder. Etienne's labor was swift and surprisingly peaceful, a stark contrast to the years of struggle that preceded this moment. When the baby girl emerged, she let out a cry so pure and strong that it seemed to resonate with the very spirits of the land. Owaino wept uncontrollably, his calloused hands trembling as he held his long-awaited daughter, a living testament to their unwavering faith. From the moment of her birth, Emma was different. Her eyes held a wisdom that seemed to belong to someone far older, and her skin had a slight luminescence that made people stop and stare. The village elders whispered among themselves, recognizing something extraordinary in this child. Old women who had previously mocked Otino now spoke of omens and miracles, claiming the gods had finally answered the couple's prayers in the most magnificent way possible. Emma's birth marked a turning point not just for Otino and Owaino, but for the entire village of Onkoba. As Emma grew, her unique qualities became more apparent. By the age of 3, she could touch a wounded animal and see it heal before everyone's eyes. Children who fell and scraped their knees would run to her, and with a simple touch, their wounds would close and pain would vanish. The village began to view her as a blessing, a gift from the goddess herself. Otino and Owino watched in awe as their daughter demonstrated healing powers that defied explanation, understanding that she was meant for something greater than an ordinary life. The rumors of Emma's healing abilities spread beyond Onkoba. People would travel from distant villages, carrying sick children and ailing elders, hoping for a miracle. Emma never turned anyone away, her compassion as remarkable as her healing touch. She would sit patiently, her small hands gently placed on those suffering, drawing out illness and pain with a concentration that belied her young age. Owino and Otino protected her, understanding the extraordinary nature of their child and the potential dangers that such a gift might attract. As she approached her 7th year, Emma's reputation grew. The goddess seemed to speak through her, guiding her actions and revealing secrets of healing that no one in the village had ever known. She understood the language of plants, knew which herbs could cure specific ailments, and seemed to have a connection with the natural world that went beyond human understanding. The villagers began to see her not just as a child, but as a sacred being, a bridge between the human world and the divine realm of their ancestral spirits. As Emma entered her 10th year, her healing powers reached unprecedented levels. Villages near and far spoke of her miraculous abilities, describing her as a living blessing from the river goddess. People would travel for days, bringing their most challenging medical cases, hoping Emma could provide relief where traditional medicine failed. Her parents watched with a mixture of pride and concern, understanding the extraordinary nature of their daughter's gift. Emma's healing was not limited to physical ailments. She could sense emotional pain, helping people overcome deep-seated traumas with a simple touch or a few carefully spoken words. The village elders began to see her as more than just a child. She was a spiritual conduit, a connection between the human world and the divine realm. Her wisdom seemed to flow from an ancient source, far beyond her years. The river goddess appeared to communicate through Emma, guiding her healing practices and revealing secret knowledge about herbs and natural remedies. She understood the intricate balance of life and healing in ways no one else in Onkoba could comprehend. Her connection to nature was so profound that animals would approach her without fear, sensing her pure and compassionate spirit. Despite her extraordinary abilities, Emma remained humble. She never sought recognition or praise, viewing her healing powers as a responsibility rather than a gift to be celebrated. Otino and Owino worked hard to keep her grounded, teaching her the importance of compassion and humility. They understood that her powers came with great potential and equally great responsibility. As drought began to threaten Onkoba, whispers of an ancient prophecy started to circulate. The village elders spoke in hushed tones about a time when a special child would be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice to save their people. Emma would listen quietly, a strange understanding flickering in her eyes, as if she already knew her destiny was intertwined with the survival of her village. The drought descended upon Onkoba like a merciless predator, consuming everything in its path with relentless intensity. Crops withered in the fields, transforming fertile lands into cracked, dusty wastelands that spoke of impending doom. Livestock became skeletal shadows, their ribs protruding through thin layers of hide, their eyes reflecting the desperation of a community on the brink of collapse. The river that had once been their lifeline began to shrink, its sacred waters receding like a dying memory. Emma watched the landscape transform, her young mind understanding the profound connection between the land's suffering and the impending challenges that would test her people's resilience. Village elders gathered in urgent meetings, their weathered faces etched with concern and fear about the approaching catastrophe. Traditional rain-calling ceremonies were performed, sacrifices were made, but the gods remained silent, offering no reprieve from the relentless heat and dryness. Whispers of an ancient prophecy began to circulate more frequently, suggesting that only a significant sacrifice could appease the spirits and bring rain to their parched land. The prophecy spoke of a pure-hearted individual who would willingly give themselves to restore balance and save the community. Emma would sit quietly during these discussions, her eyes holding a wisdom that seemed to transcend her young years. As the drought intensified, Emma's healing powers became both a blessing and a burden for the village. She worked tirelessly, using her extraordinary abilities to help people survive the harsh conditions. Her touch could bring relief to those suffering from dehydration. Her knowledge of medicinal plants helped prevent diseases that often accompany such environmental challenges. People began to see her not just as a healer, but as a potential savior, the one who might hold the key to their survival. The river goddess seemed to speak through her, guiding her actions and providing subtle hints about the impending sacrifice that would be required to save their community. The community's desperation grew with each passing day, and the talk of sacrifice became more explicit and urgent. Elders began to discuss the traditional practice of selecting a virgin to be sacrificed to the river goddess, hoping her pure blood would bring rain and restore life to their dying land. Young women in the village began to look at Emma with a mixture of fear and reverence, sensing that she might be the chosen one. Her parents, Otino and Owino, watched these developments with increasing anxiety, understanding the potential destiny that awaited their miraculous daughter. Emma's connection to the spiritual world became more pronounced during this time of crisis. She could sense the pain of the land, feel the suffering of her people, and understand the delicate balance between life and sacrifice. Visions would come to her in dreams, showing her glimpses of a future where her ultimate gift might be the salvation of her entire community. The river goddess communicated through subtle signs: a bird's flight, a cloud formation, the whisper of wind through dying crops, preparing Emma for the incredible journey that lay ahead. Her destiny was becoming clear, and she began to accept the profound responsibility that had been chosen for her. The village of Onkoba descended into a state of collective desperation as the drought continued its merciless assault on their land. Elders gathered repeatedly, their discussions becoming more intense and somber with each passing day. The ancient prophecy of a sacrificial virgin who could bring rain began to dominate every conversation, casting a dark shadow over the community. Emma, now approaching her 16th year, felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her young shoulders. Her healing powers had reached their peak, demonstrating a connection to the spiritual realm that went beyond mere human understanding. The river goddess seemed to be preparing her for something extraordinary, something that would define the fate of her entire people. Otino and Owino watched their daughter with a mixture of pride and profound fear, sensing the inevitable path that was unfolding before them. They had raised Emma knowing she was special, understanding that her miraculous birth and extraordinary healing abilities were not mere coincidences. The community had begun to look at her differently, seeing her not just as a child, but as a potential savior who might rescue them from the devastating drought. Whispers of her potential sacrifice circulated through the village, with some celebrating her potential role and others mourning the potential loss of such a remarkable young woman. Emma remained calm, her spirit seemingly connected to a higher purpose that transcended the immediate suffering around her. The river goddess began to send more explicit signs about the impending sacrifice. Strange atmospheric phenomena occurred around Emma. Birds would gather in unusual patterns, clouds would form mysterious shapes above their home, and the wind would carry whispers that only she could understand. Her dreams became increasingly prophetic, showing her visions of water returning to the land, of renewal and hope, but always with the understanding that such salvation would come at a great personal cost. The elders interpreted these signs as confirmation of Emma's critical role in their survival. They began to prepare ritual preparations, understanding that the sacrifice would require absolute purity of intention and spirit. Emma's healing powers reached their zenith during these final weeks before the potential sacrifice. She could heal entire families with a single touch, understanding the intricate connections between physical ailments and spiritual imbalances. People traveled from distant villages, bringing their most challenging medical cases, hoping to benefit from her extraordinary abilities before she potentially became the community's ultimate offering. Her compassion seemed boundless, her understanding of human suffering profound and otherworldly. The river seemed to pulse with an anticipatory energy, as if it too was preparing for the momentous event that would soon unfold. As the final preparations for the potential sacrifice began, Emma embraced her destiny with a serenity that belied her young age. She understood that her life had always been leading to this moment, that her miraculous birth, her healing powers, and her deep connection to the spiritual world were all preparation for this ultimate act of community salvation. The village held its collective breath, knowing that everything depended on her willingness to give herself completely for their survival. Her parents watched with hearts both breaking and swelling with pride, knowing that their daughter was about to become a legend that would be remembered for generations to come. The final days before the sacrifice arrived with an overwhelming sense of anticipation. Emma understood her role with a clarity that transcended her years, her connection to the river goddess growing more profound with each passing moment. The entire village prepared for the momentous event, understanding that their survival depended on her ultimate sacrifice. Rituals were performed, prayers were chanted, and the community gathered with a mixture of hope and sorrow. The river seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, waiting for the moment of redemption. Emma's parents struggled with the impending loss of their miraculous child. Otieno would spend hours sitting beside her daughter, memorizing every detail of her face, her movements, her gentle spirit. Owino maintained a stoic exterior, but his heart was breaking with the knowledge of what was to come. They had waited so long for a child, and now they would lose her in the most devastating way possible. The village elders consoled them, explaining that Emma's sacrifice would save not just their community, but potentially generations to come. Preparations for the sacred ritual began in earnest. The most respected elders prepared special ceremonial clothing for Emma, adorning her with intricate beadwork that told the story of their people's struggles. Herbs were gathered from sacred locations, each with special significance to the river goddess. The community fasted and prayed, understanding the magnitude of the upcoming event. Emma moved through these preparations with a calm that amazed everyone around her, her spirit seeming to already exist between the world of the living and the spiritual realm. On the eve of her sacrifice, Emma spent time with each family in the village, offering final healing and comfort. She touched the sick, blessed the children, and shared wisdom that seemed to come from centuries of accumulated knowledge. Her healing powers reached their most intense level, as if she was gathering and distributing all of her spiritual energy before her ultimate gift to the community. People wept, both in sorrow and in reverence of her extraordinary spirit. The river goddess seemed to whisper through the wind, acknowledging the profound sacrifice about to be made. The night before the sacrifice was filled with a strange, ethereal beauty. Emma prepared herself, understanding the deep spiritual significance of her role. She knew her sacrifice would bring rain, heal the land, and ensure the survival of her people. Her connection to the river goddess was complete, her destiny clear and unwavering. The stars seemed to align, the wind carried ancient songs, and the entire village held its breath in anticipation of the miracle that would soon unfold. The morning of the sacrifice dawned with an unusual stillness that seemed to hold the entire village in its breathless embrace. Emma dressed in the sacred white garments prepared by the village elders, her movements deliberate and calm. The intricate beadwork told the story of our people, each thread and pattern representing generations of struggle and hope. Her parents watched from a distance, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of her impending sacrifice. The river seemed to whisper ancient promises, its waters reflecting a strange, expectant light. Village elders conducted the final sacred preparations, performing rituals that had been passed down through countless generations. Incantations were spoken, sacred herbs were burned, and the community gathered in a sacred circle around Emma. She stood at the center, a beacon of hope and resilience, her healing powers radiating a final burst of energy that touched every member of the community. The prophecy was clear: her pure sacrifice would bring rain, heal the land, and ensure the survival of her people. Emma's final moments were spent in quiet reflection, communicating silently with the river goddess who had guided her entire life. She understood the profound significance of her sacrifice, knowing that her death would bring life to her entire community. Her healing powers seemed to concentrate, preparing for the ultimate act of giving. The village watched in reverent silence, understanding that they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. As the ritual began, Emma walked towards the sacred river with a grace that belied her young age. Her steps were steady, her spirit unbroken, her purpose crystal clear. The river goddess seemed to reach out, embracing her with an ethereal energy that separated her from the physical world. Her parents stood together, their hands clasped, tears streaming down their faces but understanding the greater purpose of her sacrifice. The entire village held its collective breath, waiting for the miracle that would save them. The moment of sacrifice approached, charged with a spiritual energy that seemed to connect the earthly and divine realms. Emma stood at the river's edge, her white garments flowing around her like a celestial vision. She knew her death would bring life, her sacrifice would restore balance, and her spirit would become one with the river that had always been her true home. The river goddess whispered final instructions, preparing Emma for her ultimate transformation from a human healer to an eternal spirit of renewal and hope. The moment of sacrifice arrived with a sudden, overwhelming spiritual intensity. Emma stood at the river's edge, her white garments billowing around her like ethereal wings. The entire village watched in profound silence, understanding they were witnessing a moment that would define their existence. Her healing powers concentrated into a final, magnificent burst of energy that seemed to connect the earthly and divine realms. The river goddess accepted her sacrifice, preparing to transform Emma from a mortal healer into an eternal spirit of renewal. As Emma prepared for her ultimate act of giving, she transferred her healing powers to a family known for their consistent kindness and compassion. With a gentle touch, she passed on her extraordinary gift, ensuring that her legacy of healing would continue even after her physical form disappeared. The selected family trembled under the weight of this extraordinary responsibility, understanding that they had been chosen to carry forward Emma's miraculous abilities. Her final act of generosity would ensure that her people would continue to have a source of healing and hope. The sacrifice itself was both brutal and beautiful, a moment of supreme spiritual significance. Emma walked into the river, her steps deliberate and unafraid, fully embracing her destiny. The water began to rise around her, transforming from a simple liquid to a conduit of divine energy. Her body seemed to dissolve into the river, merging with the sacred waters that had been her connection to the spiritual world throughout her life. The river goddess accepted her completely, preparing to use her pure spirit as a mechanism of renewal for the entire land. Immediately after her sacrifice, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. The first drops of rain touched the parched earth, bringing hope and life to a land that had been dying of thirst. The river where Emma was sacrificed began to flow with unprecedented strength, its waters never drying even in the harshest seasons. People recognize this as a direct result of Emma's ultimate gift, her body and spirit becoming one with the sacred waters that would now sustain their community. The villagers named this new river after Emma, declaring her the river goddess who had saved them from certain destruction. Her parents, Otino and Owino, mourned her loss but also celebrated her extraordinary destiny. They understood that their daughter had fulfilled a purpose far greater than any individual life, becoming a legend that would be remembered for generations. Emma's sacrifice had transformed not just her village, but had created a permanent source of life and hope that would sustain her people for centuries to come. The story of Emma spread beyond Onkoba, becoming a legendary tale of sacrifice and divine intervention. Her transformation from a miraculous healer to a river goddess became a cornerstone of the community's spiritual understanding. The river that bore her name continued to flow with extraordinary power, providing water and sustenance even during the most extreme droughts. Generations of villagers would tell her story, passing down the lessons of her extraordinary life and ultimate sacrifice. The family chosen to inherit Emma's healing powers became guardians of her legacy. They used her gift with the same compassion and wisdom that Emma had demonstrated throughout her life. Children born to this family were watched carefully, with the community hoping to see similar miraculous abilities manifest. The healing traditions Emma had established became a critical part of the village's medical and spiritual practices, ensuring that her spirit continued to protect and nurture her people. Emma's parents, Otino and Owino, became revered elders in the community. Their story of receiving a child after years of prayers, and then losing her to a divine purpose, became a powerful narrative of faith and sacrifice. They would spend years sharing Emma's story, ensuring that her memory remained alive in the hearts of their people. Their own lives became a testament to the power of unwavering belief and the mysterious ways in which divine intervention can manifest. The river that Emma became continued to be a sacred place of healing and spiritual connection. Pilgrims would come from distant lands to seek its miraculous waters, to pray at its banks, and to remember the young woman who had given everything for her community. The river seemed to possess a living energy, a reminder of Emma's extraordinary spirit and her ultimate act of selflessness. Its waters were believed to have healing properties, continuing the miraculous work Emma had begun during her human life. As years passed, Emma's sacrifice became more than just a local legend. It transformed into a powerful spiritual narrative that spoke to the deepest human experiences of love, sacrifice, and renewal. The two primary morals of our story, that it is never too late for divine blessing and that kindness is the highest virtue, continue to inspire generations. Her life became a beacon of hope, a reminder that one individual's pure heart and selfless act can transform an entire community's destiny.